Alright, hey guys, welcome to another YouTube video. In this video, I'll show you all the best camera settings for OBS. Go into Mousecam properties. Set your resolution or FPS type to custom. This allows you to get the full 16:9 1080p resolution out of your webcam. I'm using a Logitech C922. If I set it to device default, there'll be cropped off edges. Therefore, I set it to custom, giving me a full 16:9 resolution. I set it to 1080p and the highest FPS is 30. If I set it to 720p, the highest FPS is actually 60 FPS, which actually looks the same as 30 FPS, so I go for the higher resolution. Next, set your video format to MJPEG. Setting your video format to YUY2 will give you better colors, but a lower frame rate. Personally, I use MJPEG, as the higher frame rate of MJPEG at 30 FPS looks much better than the lower frame rate at YUY2, even though YUY2 gives you better colors. Under color space, I set my color space to Rec 2100 HLG. This gives me a better dynamic range and better colors than Rec 709. Under color range, I set my color range to full, as setting a color range to limited will make your dynamic range a little lower. Thus, a color range of full gives you more details in the shadows and also less blurring out of your skin or less blurring out of the highlights. Buffering, set it to auto detect. Under configure video, go to camera control, untick auto exposure, apply, click OK, deactivate and activate the webcam. This removes the overexposed areas. You can even set the exposure to -6 and then go to video prop amp and increase the gain. Increasing the gain will increase the ISO or the sensitivity of the camera to light. This increases the exposure but can also introduce noise. If you increase the gain by too much, stuff like my skin gets blown out. Those are the highlights. Thus, set the gain such that none of the image is blown out and the whole image looks bright enough. Under exposure, changing the exposure actually changes the shutter speed. As you can see, each frame is actually very clear, whereas each frame is much blurrier here. At a lower exposure, at -7, the shutter speed is much faster, allowing less light to pass through the camera. That's why the overall image is darker. At a higher exposure, the shutter speed is much longer, allowing more light to go in and also more motion blur. Set it to around -5 or -6 to get the most natural motion blur and the best light. Do not use this brightness filter, as it just makes the image look washed out when you increase the brightness. You can use the contrast if you want. This gives your image more contrast. You can utilize saturation and sharpness too. However, do not increase sharpness by too much, as it looks unnatural. Remember to take auto white balance. This sets the white balance automatically. A white balance too high will be too yellow. A white balance too low will be too blue. This is in Kelvin. Just set it to auto. Backlight comp gives you more exposure if you need it. However, I turn it off as it makes my skin look, or the highlights, look blown out. Alright, a quick interjection. The anti-flicker setting, you can set it to 50 Hz or 60 Hz. This basically removes the flickery light in your background. Set it to 50 Hz for European regions and 60 Hz for American regions. Basically, the electricity is either 50 Hz or 60 Hz coming through your wall, making your light flicker at different rates. So the anti-flicker allows you to set your camera to anti-flicker 50 Hz mode if you're living in a European region, and anti-flicker 60 Hz mode if you're living in an American region. Go into filters. I've added different filters, which are PNG files. Simply search PNG LUT download this one, then go into Lightroom, edit a screenshot of your image without any filters, copy those changes and paste it into your LUT. Export that LUT, which is edited, convert it to PNG, then add it into OBS. I've made different LUTs with the exposure slider maximized and the exposure slider down to the minimum, as well as other exposure and other color settings. This way I can control the highlights, the contrast, and the shadows directly from the filters page. The color correction tool does not allow you to change many of these features. The brightness features just makes it washed out. The gamma also makes it washed out, and contrast just overblows some stuff. Only saturation and hue shift are useful. As you can see, the saturation up filter allows me to introduce a more colorful image, and green allows me to remove pink undertones. However, there are no pink undertones in this image right now, so I can just mute that. Yellow allows me to make the image slightly warmer. Shadows up allows me to get more detail out of my mousepad. However, I just set it to the minimum and turn it off, as it doesn't really look good with many details and shadows in my mousepad. It just looks grey. Under highlights, I just turn down the highlights all the way to minimize any blowing out of my skin or any highlights. Contrast is a good one. Increasing it by a little bit can make your image look more punchy and nice. Personally, I flip my webcam upside down. And then, in main, add a filter called Image Mask or Blend, setting it to Alpha Mask. The PNG is just a PNG with a black box in it, allowing you to mask out that black box, cropping your image to just where the black box is in your PNG. Next, add a shadow. It's just a duplicate of the mask, colored in red with a shadow. This way, I know if any red parts are popping out from the sides of the image, allowing me to size it perfectly. You can add your follower count or even the Spotify widget. My chat is also here. So that's how I set up stuff for streaming. You can crop such that it only shows a certain number of messages at a time. Just hold Alt to crop. Alright, that's all for this video. If you have any questions, ask them in the comment section below. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.